Good afternoon, I'm Dilly MacFarlane, and welcome once again to the Alumni Special. I'm pleased to welcome as my guest today, alumna Lindita Stanbury-Walker. Hi Lindita, welcome.
Thank you, Dilly. I'm glad to be here.
Good. We're going to be talking with Lindita today about a history of Mount Saint Vincent Academy. And for those who in our audience may not be aware, this of course is the school that was the origin of the university where we all are working and attending today. Lindita, how did you become interested in this project?
Well, Dilly, I've come back to school. I'm now an education student here at the Mount, and one of my required courses is a foundation course, and the one that I took was the history of education. And as a term paper, we were required to come up with a paper that projected some idea of the history of education locally, and a suggestion was made about perhaps doing Mount Saint Vincent University, and as an alumna of Mount Academy, I thought this would be the one I'd like to do the very most, and I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it very much.
I'm sure. I understand now, for instance, that your family have been closely connected with both the Academy and the college, and now, of course, the university. Where does the family connection begin with Mount Saint Vincent?
Well, Dilly, the Academy was started in 1873, and I believe at that time there was a member of my family there at the time. The third head of the Order of Sisters of Charity locally was Sister Baptista Bald, who would have been a great-great-aunt of mine. And her nieces, my grandfather's sisters, attended the Academy in about 1905, and my grandmother attended the Academy at that time as well. Her name was Linda Stanbury-Walker, and she was from Havana, Cuba, and my grandfather would come to visit his sisters, and he met her there then, and so began a love affair that lasted years and years, and my grandmother sent her daughter, my mother, and my mother sent my sister and myself, and along the way there have been various cousins and second cousins and aunts and so on. I think there are 18 members of the family who are alumni.
Very interesting, very interesting. Now I know that you personally attended the Academy and were a member of the final graduating class, is that not true?
Yes, I was, and more's the pity because I didn't actually was a member of the grade 12 class. I was a member of the grade 11 class, and the school closed in 1972, as you know, and the year of my graduation in 1973 would have been the 100th anniversary. So we were all quite disappointed that such an era had come to an end for education and for education in our own family.
I see. Now, how did you begin your project? I know that you would have to do a fair amount of research to even begin at the very beginning. So I suppose you got a lot of help from the sisters.
Oh, I did indeed. And the first person I spoke to was Sister Margaret Flaff, who is the curator of the Mount Saint Vincent Mother House Museum and Archives, which is right in the Mother House. And she made available to me some wonderful old newspaper clippings and some of the histories that have been compiled by Sister Frances d'Assisi. And there have been books published as well. One is History of the Sisters of Charity by Sister Maura Power, which was published in the 1950s, I believe. And that had a lot of good information about the background of the Academy and how the sisters came to Halifax in the first place and how they started up. And from those clippings and these wonderful old boxes filled with information that is just lying there waiting to be read, I was able to pull together an interesting history of a really unique school.
I see. Now, to begin with, for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with the order itself, I understand that the order was founded by St. Elizabeth Seton, also known as Mother Seton, before her canonization. And she at what time did she live? When was, do you know when the order actually began here, or?
Well, the order arrived in Halifax in in the 1860s, and they established a school in Halifax. Mother Seton encouraged her sisters to travel and to establish satellite orders, and so they came to Halifax. And the quarters that they established initially in the city were in a fairly downtown location, and they were quickly cramped and ill-equipped, and they knew that they needed a larger, more secluded area for their growing novitiate. And so they set about looking for more suitable quarters. And as it happens, the brother-in-law of one of the sisters who was in charge at the time, a Sister Helena Affleck, I believe her name is, he had available some property in Rockingham on which we are presently sitting. And so it was. This seemed to be a suitable location for the new novitiate because it was close enough to the city to be involved in well, what they called urban events, and yet far enough away so that the seclusion necessary for reflection and study was available to them.
I see. And so the prime consideration was to find a place to establish a school.
To establish a novitiate first.
Oh, I see.
The school, from what I understand, the school just gradually came along because of this novitiate. The sisters came out here in 1873, and they brought with them a little girl who she was left with them to be brought up, and so they would have educated her, and then a building contractor in town came and spoke to the sisters and asked if his little girl could come and learn from them. And so gradually, I don't know if it was word of mouth or what, but by the time the school opened in September, they had 16 pupils, and they started from there.
I see. Now, what kind of curriculum would they offer, Lindita, at a school like this?
Well, they offered the basics. They offered English and arithmetic and so on. But there were a lot of things that aren't offered now: music, the needlework, elocution, certainly religious studies for the little ones, and the motivation was to teach women a certain amount of independence, but starting from the very young. It's interesting to read the connections between how they felt about what women should be then and now. And if I may be permitted to make a little quote, Monsignor at the time, actually at the turn of the century, so I'm going ahead of myself, he said, "Catholic education differs much from purely secular education. We Catholics do not want to destroy womanhood, but to elevate it. We do not want to transform it, to create a new woman, but to perfect it. We want to make her a shining light in the family, in society, in the church. We do not want to crush the faculties, but to develop them." So really, they were encouraging women to make the most of themselves. And I think that if you asked a lot of people, they wouldn't suspect that that they were quite as forward-thinking as they were.
Well, do you know, I think that one of the most outstanding impressions that is developed in reading the history of the contribution of the Sisters of Charity is their incredible foresight in the fields of education and in establishing this school, because I understand that the academic standards were very highly regarded in the academic community, even in its early years.
Oh, Dilly, nothing could be more true. The reports of excellence in the local press were just astonishing to me. By 1879, now this is only 6 years, a report was made of the closing exercises of pupils who have evidently profited by the admirable teaching of their instructors. All concurred in congratulating the sisters on the success of their efforts to make the Academy what it is now, one of the leading educational institutions in the province. So right from its very early days, it had a reputation for excellence that it maintained.
I see. Now, how many of these students would have been local little girls, and how many would have come from faraway places? Do you?
Well, initially I think many were local, but as the building got a little bigger and could accommodate more students, through the years the building just got larger and larger. There were additions and improvements on a continual basis, and quite early in its stages, they were able to house 120 students. Now, I don't think they had 120 at the time, but they had accommodations for 120. So many would be from the province, I think.
I see. Now, we have some photographs that we're going to be showing the viewers. One from the North Plaza, and I think it gives our audience an idea of the beauty and the grace of the structure, of Victorian gingerbread turreted building that probably, as you say, housed more than 120, I think.
Yes.
Because
yes.
of course all the sisters would have lived there too.
That's right. Yes, when I spoke about 120, I meant students.
And their classes would have taken place in this building as well.
The novitiate, the school, the classes, everything was there.
Now that building was located not where the current university buildings are now, but closer to the Bedford Highway.
Yes, that's right. And chief among the features of this building was the beautiful chapel. Things came from all over for this chapel, and I think we have a photograph later on that will show how wonderful this chapel was.
And I understand that marble for the chapel had been imported from Europe, and a number of interesting frescoes that were done by the sisters themselves, several who were more artistically inclined. It was a great loss when the building was lost to fire. But I know that some of our viewers may be aware that the Great Fire took place in 1951, but I understand that there had been a fire before that.
In 1913, there was a terrible drought in the area, and just where the school was located, a fire had started in the area and was moving closer and closer to the school, and great hue and cry about what's going to happen. And fortunately, not unfortunately, rain came and the wind changed, and big sigh of relief. Actually, in the press, quite a bit earlier, there was mention of prevention measures for fire, hoses, escape stairways, and so on, which makes it very interesting in light of the fact that the building was destroyed by fire. They had made provisions in case of fire.
This fire took place in the middle of winter, January, I understand, when there was a terrible ice storm that followed, and I know that the community came to the rescue of the Mount at that time to help the sisters, who managed somehow to provide escape for all of the students. There wasn't a life lost. It
was remarkable. They had so many things going against them. The coldest night of the year, the fact that the hoses that would bring water from the basin had frozen, and there was no way that they could get water on the building, that there were so many students. The sisters were very orderly, and I think the figure 3 minutes was mentioned to me. It seems incredible. Some fathers would come from the city to pick up their children. Their daughters were shivering in the cold, picked them up in their cars, and they could feel the heat of the flames right down the Bedford Highway.
Now, your sister was a student here at that time, wasn't she?
She was, and it was my father who felt the heat of the flames.
Really?
And it was incredible. I still have on my bed the blanket that she used in the fire, that she grabbed from her bed quickly and bundled herself in the fire.
My goodness. Now, after the fire, there was a great effort to reestablish the Mount as the Academy and the college, too. Now, I understand at the time, though, that our current Everestus building was under construction.
Yes. So you see, really, at the time of the fire, there was not only the novitiate and the academy, but there was also the growing university, which had been established in 1925. As many of our alumni know, that we just came through our 60th anniversary, and we're all very proud of that. But so the university classes were also held there, and the residence was there. And so after the fire, temporary quarters could be quickly established for the university, as their permanent quarters had already begun. And so then, after the temporary procedures took care of housing, the academy carried on. The students were still instructed. The younger students went to the Gainsborough Hotel in Hubbard's. Penelope my sister was one of those. And the other students, some of them ended up at the vocational school, and others went with religious communities in the area.
And then I suppose it would have been, what, 1958 that the Mother House structure was opened?
Yes.
And then academy classes continued there?
Yes.
And right up on until 1972?
Yes. I attended classes in the new Mother House, which is an enormous building. I wish we had a photograph, because nobody could believe the 4 courtyards.
I hear tell that is one of the largest buildings in eastern Canada. There's 7 miles of corridors in that building.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. I would like to thank you, Lindita, for coming in today. I wish we had more time to talk with you. It's a fascinating subject, and my compliments to you on doing such a thorough job on accounting for the history of the Academy. I hope you'll come back and speak to us again about your work.
I'd love to, Dilly.
Good
luck.
luck.
It'd be my pleasure.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
And it's me, Dilly MacFarlane, thanking you for joining us again on the Alumni Special. Bye-bye.